Realism tips. I know it's been a very long time, so I appreciate your patience with the series while I got my real life in order. I will be preparing quite a few weeks worth of realism tips just to prevent a lack of content, so we should have at least a month ready to go by the time of this posting. With that, we shouldn't have any issues with keeping up, as I can then prepare ahead of time. So please make sure to continue submitting tips, as some of the ones that I'm going to be incorporating in this little batch I'm doing currently were submitted even just as recently as this year. So I or another member of staff will always come back around to it eventually. So again, thank you very much for your patience on the subject, and I am looking forward to getting to showcase more and more natural behaviors in both games as we proceed. So with that being said, we're going to kind of ease back into it with some general tips and tricks that are just good to keep in mind, and little things that you can do in general to incorporate into your gameplay to give a better experience to yourself and to actors. So I've got my Dainani here with the just general skin, and we are going to be looking into some of these details. So first and foremost, and the reason why I picked Donnie for this one, is that dominance can be displayed in a variety of different ways. So you can do so with generally, 3 calling at something, or your remote wheel doing the 3 angry lines to showcase that you're angry at something, or to showcase that you don't like what something is doing, or even just that you're better with it. You can use the broadcast or the little speaker to do that as well. So there are more subtle ways I can do this in everyday interaction. So say this log here is my packmate that is less dominant than I am. To reinforce that, you could do something as obvious as coming up and biting them, profile allowing, or you can do the more subtle approach, and this is something that animals will really do IRL, which would be biting next to them in fake nips if they're doing something especially egregious to you. But more often than not, it'd be as simple as standing over them, kind of putting yourself metaphorically and literally above them. You could jump up on this rock and just showcase that you have the better position. If they were up on this rock, you could just get up and, very subtly push them out of the way. And if they catch on to your cues and they are less dominant than you, then they should heed to that and they should yield that better spot to you. Of course, not everybody's going to like being the subordinate, so somebody may back off, but just little microtransactions like that can go a very far way in reinforcing pack boundaries and current status of everything. So again, a lot of animals won't really default to screaming and biting each other. Little injuries in the wild can lead to nasty infections and lasting side effects, so they're not going to do that to somebody that they're working cooperatively with unless it really came down to it. More often than not, they'd be getting warnings. They'd have those little interactions to really cement where they lie. And a lot of animals will find, comfort in that area of their social structure, of knowing where they are and where they belong. Even if it's not at the top, that can still be rewarding to know. So just keep that in mind in your little everyday interactions with others of your pack or group, and keep in mind those kinds of behaviors when you're not always a dominant, and making sure you're giving everybody else a good experience by yielding to that dominance. Ways to showcase submission would be making yourself smaller, looking away and averting eye contact, walking away when they come up to you. It can be as simple and as easy as that, just to reinforce your current standings. Our next tip here is going to be about making the most of your environment. So there are some objects, of course, that you can interact with. You can collect branches and pine cones and stones. And while we can't actually nest here, you can emulate nesting by gathering piles of these objects in an area that already looks like it could have a nest, or a secluded area like this one here. So like maybe tucked up over here, you could set some pine cones or branches and just generally muss those together to create a sort of nest. And that could also be a more outwardly expression of wanting to nest to your other group mates and potential love interests, beyond what goes in reproduction according of a specific profile, of course. So just little things to think about there. I just completely phased through a tree. As you go about daily life for your dinosaur, especially avian dinosaurs like Deinonychus, may be more prone to having those sorts of nesting tendencies, as that would be pretty ingrained behavior and not something that they may even be conscious of doing. They may just instinctually put together those sorts of resources and ways to provide for their young. So, especially with faster dinosaurs, an important thing to bear in mind is momentum does exist in this game. So I'm running. Oop, I wanted to stop. And it took me a few extra steps to do so. So you can actually incorporate this directly into your gameplay in a variety of ways. You can act out something that's small and doesn't know its own limits. So a juvenile playing could be running. Oh, I couldn't quite stop in time. I hit this thing. Ow. Mom, come help me. I ran into something. Dad, come help me. I ran into something. And just kind of use that as like a baseline in your acting. Even small things like that can make a very big and realistic difference. On a practical note, it is good to know that momentum exists in this game, as that could prevent you from running off of cliffs and other things of that nature, especially as larger dinosaurs or faster dinosaurs. This momentum can also throw you off of balance in hunts, so if you're running after something and they switch suddenly, then maybe you're running ahead a little bit and then you have to take the extra time to turn back around and come along. Or vice versa, maybe you're trying to shake something and you're running. Oh, you try and turn. Oh, you can't turn quite as well as you thought you could. I'm going to be departing from our little Deinonychus for this next tip here, because I think it is going to be helpful to showcase on an herbivore. So for this, it just says that if you are an herbivore, to try and vary where you eat bushes from, as it can get pretty static just standing in one place and munching. So you can approach a bush from different angles to kind of mimic browsing and getting to the best places. And if you angle your head correctly, according to this person, you can actually make it look like you're eating from the ground itself or even surrounding foliage, which is more realistic, as animals in real life wouldn't all just be eating the one food source. So let me just go ahead and see if I can get a good example of that browsing behavior, and I will showcase that now. So you can see here I'm trying to move in, like I'm getting more berries, and in this particular angle, it actually looks more like I'm eating the bush next to it than the actual berry bush, which can offer just a little bit of variety to your everyday interactions with eating. So let's see here. This one may be even better. Yeah, so that one looks even more like I'm just eating out of the bush and not just berries. Let me see if I can mimic eating out the ground. Eel likes to bring its head up, so it really does look more like it's actually browsing than that, but if I kind of come this way, it doesn't super look like I'm grazing, but I do think that this is a nice little tidbit that you can do in a nice little realistic way to mimic foraging as an herbivore and eating off of different plants. Probably one of our best tips is always to just try and act realistic, no matter who or what is around you. You never know who's watching. It could be as obvious as somebody crouching in a bush a few feet away from you, or it could even be myself or another admin or tech in Spectate. I will go into spectate off and to player watch, and if I see particularly good or immersive behavior, I'm gonna try and start incorporating that into these videos. So if you're acting really well, even if you're alone, you could get rewarded for that, and I do want to do events to help do that as well. So always try and be as realistic as you can be for the benefit of the unseen eye around you. WWD is a stage. There is no backstage when you're on the server itself. If anything, that's our Discord. So always try and keep that in mind whenever you take the time to come onto our servers. We're really glad that you're here. But I'll go ahead and leave that off here. I do hope that you enjoyed these general tips and tricks, as it's just going to be a nice little foray and easing back into it, and I hope that that keeps that accessible for players that have joined since our last iteration of Realism Tips. If you have any questions about anything, or if you have tips of your own, please navigate over to the Discord. On the Discord, you can submit your own tips through the Google Forms in the tips channels. And you can also ask any questions in acting questions or assistance questions. Both are good. And if you have any questions for me in particular, feel free to leave them down in the comments or message me on Discord. I am always happy to help. So, with that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you for your patience. And have a good one. We'll see you next time.